The late September sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of St. Michael's Catholic Church in Arlington, Virginia. Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen adjusted his civilian clothes, a simple navy polo and khaki pants, feeling oddly exposed without his uniform. After 18 months deployed in Afghanistan, everything about civilian life felt foreign, like wearing someone else's skin. He sat in his rental car for a moment longer, watching families stream into the church. Children in their Sunday best ran ahead of their parents, laughter echoing off the brick walls. Normal life, the kind he'd been protecting but had forgotten how to be part of. His phone buzzed, a text from his sister Angela. "Where are you? Mass starts in 10 minutes. Marcus had deliberately arrived late, hoping to slip in unnoticed. The last thing he wanted was to steal attention from baby Thomas's big day. This was Angela and David's moment, not his. The church's heavy wooden doors groaned as he pulled them open. The familiar scent of incense and old wood triggered memories of his own baptism in this same church 32 years ago. Back when his biggest worry was whether he'd get ice cream after Sunday school, he spotted his family immediately. They'd claimed 3 entire pews near the front. His mother, still elegant at 65, wore the jade necklace his father had given her before he passed. Angela bounced Thomas gently, the baby's white christening gown a stark contrast to her deep purple dress. David stood beside her, every inch the proud father, his arm protectively around his wife's shoulders. Marcus slipped into the back pew, behind the Hendersons, old family friends who probably wouldn't recognize him after all these years. Mrs. Henderson turned slightly, then back to her husband, whispering something. They didn't acknowledge him. The Mass began with Father Rodriguez's warm greeting. Marcus knew the rhythms by heart, though the words felt different now. "Peace be with you," carried weight when you'd seen what the absence of peace looked like. During the homily, he caught glimpses of his extended family. Cousins he'd grown up with, now with children of their own. Uncle Robert, his father's brother, who'd always said Marcus would amount to nothing. Aunt Patricia, who used to sneak him cookies when his mother wasn't looking. None of them had noticed him. "Today, we welcome Thomas David Chen into our faith community," Father Rodriguez announced, and the congregation shifted their attention to the baptismal font. Marcus watched his sister hand Thomas to the priest. The baby gurgled happily, tiny fists waving. David's parents stood as godparents, beaming with pride. His mother dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, the same one she'd used at his father's funeral 5 years ago. Marcus had been in Iraq then, unable to come home. "Marcus Chen, are you present?" His head snapped up. Father Rodriguez was looking directly at him, smiling. Angela had asked him to be Thomas's godfather months ago, in a letter that had reached him at a forward operating base. He'd written back saying yes, of course, but hadn't thought she'd actually... "Yes, Father," Marcus said, standing awkwardly. "Please come forward." Every head in the church turned. The walk from the back pew to the baptismal font felt like crossing a minefield. He was acutely aware of his casual clothes among the sea of suits and formal dresses. His mother's hand flew to her mouth when she saw him. "I didn't know you were back," Angela whispered as he took his place beside her, tears streaming down her face. "Surprise," he managed, his voice rough. The ceremony continued, but Marcus felt the shift in energy. Whispers rippled through the pews. He caught fragments. "Is that Marcus? When did he get back? He looks so different." Uncle Robert's voice carried over the others. "Probably couldn't even get leave properly. Always was irresponsible." Heat crept up Marcus's neck, but he focused on Thomas, on the water being poured over his nephew's head, on the sacred promise he was making to guide this child in faith. After the ceremony, as families gathered for photos, Marcus found himself standing alone near a statue of St. Michael. Appropriate, he thought. The patron saint of soldiers, standing guard while everyone else celebrated. His cousins chatted in tight circles, occasionally glancing his way but not approaching. David's family monopolized Angela and the baby. His mother was cornered by church ladies wanting to know everything about his sudden appearance. "Some coffee, dear?" Mrs. Martinez, one of the church volunteers, offered him a paper cup without making eye contact, as if he were any stranger who'd wandered in off the street. "Thank you, ma'am," Marcus said, accepting it gratefully. He was contemplating slipping out when a firm hand landed on his shoulder. Military instinct kicked in. He nearly dropped the coffee as he spun around, body tensing for threat assessment. "Easy, Sergeant." Major Patricia Williams stood before him in full dress uniform, her bronze star and purple heart gleaming under the church's fluorescent lights. Marcus automatically straightened, muscle memory overriding his civilian clothes. "Ma'am," he said, not quite saluting but coming close. Major Williams smiled. "At ease, Chen. Didn't expect to see you here." My nephew's baptism, ma'am. I'm his godfather. Outstanding. Family's important. She glanced around the room, her trained eye taking in the dynamics. Though they seem to be giving you a wide berth, Marcus shrugged, trying to appear unbothered. They don't know what to say. It's fine. Is it? Major Williams' voice carried the same tone she used when calling out substandard performance. When did you get stateside? 3 days ago. Ma'am. Processing out at Belvoir. And your family didn't know you were coming? I thought... Marcus paused, unsure how to explain the complicated emotions that had led him to surprise them. I didn't want to disrupt things. Angela had everything planned perfectly. Major Williams studied him with the intense gaze that had earned her the nickname Eagle Eye among the troops. Chen, can I share something with you? Of course, ma'am. You know why I'm here? My daughter goes to school with David's niece, Small World. But I almost didn't come because I thought my presence, the uniform, would make it about me instead of the family. She gestured to her medals. Then I realized something. Hiding who we are, what we've done, doesn't make us humble. It makes us invisible. And our families need to see us, all of us, not just the parts that fit neatly into their normal lives. Before Marcus could respond, she raised her voice slightly, addressing a group of his cousins who were openly staring. Excuse me, are you related to Staff Sergeant Chen? His cousin Michael, the one who'd always beaten him at basketball growing up, nodded uncertainly. He's our cousin. Outstanding. You must be incredibly proud. Major Williams's tone brooked no argument. Do you know your cousin led 15 successful convoy operations through some of the most dangerous territory in Afghanistan? Saved 3 lives under direct fire? This man is the reason 18 soldiers made it home to their families. The church reception area had gone quiet. Even baby Thomas seemed to pause in his fussing. Ma'am, that's not... Marcus started, but she cut him off with a look. Sergeant Chen was specifically requested for my unit because of his exceptional performance. His commander, that would be me, called him indispensable. In 15 years of service, I've given that designation to exactly 5 soldiers. She turned back to Michael and the gathering crowd of relatives. Your cousin is a hero. Not the Hollywood kind, the real kind. The kind who does his job with excellence every single day in conditions that would break most people. Angela appeared at Marcus's elbow, Thomas in her arms. Is this true? Major Williams smiled warmly at her. Ma'am, your brother is one of the finest soldiers I've ever had the privilege to command. You chose well for your son's godfather. This child will have a protector who understands what it truly means to stand guard over those we love. She turned back to Marcus, her voice dropping to command level. Chen, I'll see you at the debrief tomorrow. 1400 hours. Yes, ma'am. As Major Williams made her way to the exit, the atmosphere in the room shifted palpably. Uncle Robert approached first, his usual swagger replaced by something almost resembling humility. Marcus, I had no idea. It's just my job, Uncle Robert. No. His mother's voice cut through, stronger than he'd heard it in years. She'd broken free from the church ladies and now stood before him, tears streaming. It's not just a job. It's who you are. My son. The protector. She pulled him into a fierce embrace, and suddenly Marcus was surrounded. Angela pressed close with Thomas. David clapped him on the back. Cousins reached out to touch his shoulders, and questions flew. When did this happen? Why didn't you tell us? Can you talk about it? Are you okay? Are you really okay? For the first time in 18 months, Marcus felt the rigid military bearing slip away. These weren't just civilians who couldn't understand. They were his family, fumbling toward connection the only way they knew how. I'm sorry, Angela whispered against his shoulder. I should have introduced you properly. I should have... You were focused on Thomas, Marcus said. That's as it should be. No, she pulled back, eyes fierce. Your family. You matter. We should have made sure you knew that. Father Rodriguez appeared at the edge of the group. If I may interrupt, I believe we have some family photos to take. And Marcus, I expect you'll be joining us for the celebration lunch. Your mother has been planning it for weeks. I don't want to impose... Impose? His mother's voice cracked. You're the godfather. You're my son. You belong here. As they arranged themselves for photos, Marcus found himself at the center instead of the edges. Thomas grabbed his finger with surprising strength, and Marcus made a silent promise to the baby. I'll teach you to be strong, little man, but also to be present, to show up, to let yourself be seen. The photographer called for smiles, and for the first time since his boots touched American soil, Marcus didn't have to force it. Major Williams had been right. Being invisible wasn't humility. It was fear. And Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen had faced down worse things than his family's inability to understand his world. Uncle Marcus, his teenage cousin Sarah said, tugging on his sleeve as they waited for the next photo setup. Will you tell us about Afghanistan? Mom says we shouldn't ask, but Marcus looked down at her earnest face, then around at his gathered family. His mother nodded encouragingly. Angela bounced Thomas, waiting. Even Uncle Robert leaned in. Maybe over lunch, Marcus said finally. Some stories are better told over your grandmother's cooking. She made your favorite, his mother said softly. Just in case you came home. Home. The word sat strangely in his chest, but as Thomas gurgled and reached for him again, Marcus began to think maybe he could learn what it meant again. He'd protected the idea of home for 18 months. Now it was time to actually live in it. The September sun had shifted, casting new light through the stained glass windows. As the photographer positioned them for one final shot, Marcus stood tall, not at attention, not hidden in the back, but present. Simply, fully present. Everyone say Thomas, the photographer called out, and as his family's voices rose together, Marcus added his own, letting it blend and belong with theirs. He was done being invisible. Major Williams had reminded him of a fundamental truth. Sometimes the greatest act of service isn't standing apart, it's standing together. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows of his mother's dining room, the same light that had illuminated countless family dinners throughout Marcus's childhood. But now, seated at the extended table surrounded by relatives, he felt like he was navigating a social minefield more complex than any tactical situation he'd faced overseas. So, Marcus, Uncle Robert began. Uncle Robert, sawing into his mother's legendary pot roast. This Major Williams seemed pretty impressed with you. She's a good commander, Marcus replied simply, focusing on the familiar comfort of his mother's cooking. The beef was tender, falling apart at the touch of his fork. Nothing like the MREs he'd grown accustomed to. Don't be modest, Angela interjected, shifting baby Thomas to her other arm. She said you saved lives. The table grew quiet, 23 pairs of eyes turning toward him. Marcus set down his fork carefully, a habit born from months of eating in hostile territory where sudden movements meant danger. Everyone over there saves lives, he said. That's the job. But specifically, his cousin Michael pressed, leaning forward. What happened? I mean, if you can talk about it. Marcus caught his mother's worried glance. She'd been stealing looks at him throughout the meal, as if verifying he was really there, really whole. He understood that look, had seen it on too many mothers' faces at Dover Air Force Base. There was an incident, Marcus began slowly, choosing his words with the same precision he'd used for mission reports. Our convoy hit an IED, improvised explosive device. The lead vehicle was disabled. Sarah, his teenage cousin, gasped softly. Her mother, Aunt Patricia, placed a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. Were you hurt? His mother asked, her voice barely above a whisper. No, ma'am. I was in the third vehicle. But the soldiers in the lead Humvee? Marcus paused, seeing not his family's dining room but the dusty Afghan road, the twisted metal, the smoke. They were trapped, under fire from hostile forces. David poured him a glass of water without being asked. Marcus nodded his thanks, took a sip, and continued. Standard protocol would have been to maintain defensive positions and wait for QRF, quick reaction force. But the vehicle was burning. They didn't have time. So what did you do? Michael asked. What needed doing? Marcus said simply. Dismounted with two others, laid down suppressive fire, and extracted the wounded. PFC Morrison had a severed femoral artery. Had to apply a tourniquet while Specialist Rodriguez covered us. Under fire? Uncle Robert's fork had stopped halfway to his mouth. You mean people were shooting at you while you were… Yes, sir. The dining room fell silent except for Thomas's soft babbling. Marcus could feel the weight of their stares, the mix of horror and awe and something else. Distance. The gulf between their Sunday dinner and his Tuesday in hell. How do you… Aunt Patricia started, then stopped. How do you just do that? Run toward danger? Marcus considered the question. How did you explain that moment when training overrode terror? When the screams of wounded soldiers became louder than the crack of rifle fire? When everything compressed to a simple equation, move or they die? You don't think about it, he said finally. You think about them. Morrison had just gotten engaged, showed everyone her ring the night before. Thompson had a 2-year-old he'd never met, born while he was deployed. Carter was 19, joined straight out of high school to pay for college. He looked around the table. They weren't heroes or statistics. They were people. My people. And they all survived? Angela asked softly. They all survived, Marcus confirmed. Morrison lost her leg below the knee, but she's walking again, competing in Paralympic trials now. Thompson made it home for his son's 3rd birthday. Carter started college last fall. Sends me updates on his grades. His grandmother, quiet until now, reached across the table and touched his hand. You stay in contact? Yes, ma'am. It's hard to explain. When you go through something like that together, you're connected. Forever. Like family, she said, understanding in her weathered eyes. Like family, Marcus agreed. Young Sarah cleared her throat. Uncle Marcus, that major said you led 15 convoy operations. Were they all like that? No, Marcus said, offering her a small smile. Most were routine. Long, hot, dusty drives delivering supplies or transporting personnel. The dangerous moments, he shrugged, maybe 5% of the time. But you prepare for that 5% every second of the other 95. That must be exhausting, his mother said. Marcus met her eyes. Yes, ma'am. It is. The honesty seemed to break something open in the room. Questions came faster now, less tentative. What was the hardest part? Did you ever think about quitting? What was it like, coming back? Do you miss it? That last question, from David of all people, made Marcus pause. Did he miss it? The clarity of purpose? The brotherhood? The simple mathematics of survival? Sometimes, he admitted. Over there, everything is clear. Black and white. Threat or not threat. Mission or not mission. Here. He gestured vaguely at the comfortable dining room, the suburban peace. Here is complicated. How so? David pressed. Marcus searched for words. There, I knew exactly who I was and what I was supposed to do. Here, I'm not Staff Sergeant Chen. I'm just Marcus, and I'm not sure I remember how to be him anymore. His mother made a soft sound of distress. Angela reached over and squeezed his hand. You're still you, she said firmly. Just more. With really bad timing, Uncle Robert added, surprising everyone. Showing up late to your own nephew's baptism? Very dramatic. The unexpected humor broke the tension. Marcus found himself chuckling. Occupational hazard. We're trained to infiltrate unnoticed. Well, you failed spectacularly, Michael said, grinning. Thanks to your major. She's not subtle, Marcus agreed. Never has been. Once made a colonel cry during a briefing because his logistics plan would have gotten people killed. She sounds terrifying, Sarah said with obvious admiration. She is, Marcus confirmed. Also the best leader I've ever served under. She sees people. Really sees them. Not just their function or rank, but who they are. Like she saw you today, his grandmother observed. Marcus nodded slowly. The major had seen him trying to disappear and had refused to let him. Just like she'd refused to let him give up when exhaustion and grief threatened to overwhelm him after particularly brutal missions. Can you tell us more about your unit? Angela asked, settling Thomas into his high chair. The people you served with? So Marcus did. He told them about Rodriguez, who could fix anything mechanical and taught English to Afghan children during downtime. About Washington, who sent half his pay home to support his siblings and never complained about pulling extra shifts. About Lieutenant Park, fresh from West Point, who learned to trust his NCOs and became one of the finest officers Marcus knew. He told them about the interpreter, Amadi, who risked his life daily to help them communicate with locals and was now trying to get his family to safety. About the camp dog, Stupid, named ironically because he was anything but, who could detect IEDs better than some equipment and saved countless lives. As he spoke, Marcus watched his family's faces transform. The distant awe was fading, replaced by something warmer. They were seeing not just a soldier, but a leader, a mentor, a friend, a whole person who had lived a complete life in their absence. You built a family there, his mother said softly, when he paused to eat some of the now cold pot roast. Had to, Marcus said. When you're that far from home in that kind of situation, you either bond or break. We chose to bond. But now you're home, Aunt Patricia said. You can have both families. Marcus wanted to agree, wanted it to be that simple. But how did you explain the guilt of being safe when others weren't? The hypervigilance that made him catalog exits and assess threats in his mother's dining room? The dreams that woke him at 0300, reaching for a rifle that wasn't there? I'm trying, he said instead. It's an adjustment. Baby Thomas chose that moment to fling a spoonful of mashed carrots across the table, hitting Uncle Robert squarely in the chest. The room erupted in laughter, and Marcus felt something ease in his chest. This chaos and warmth and imperfection, this was what he'd been protecting. Not an abstract concept of freedom, but Sunday dinners and babies throwing food and families coming together despite their differences. So what's next? David asked as Angela cleaned up Thomas's mess with practiced efficiency. Are you staying in? Getting out? Processing out, Marcus said. My enlistment's up next month, Time to figure out what comes next. Any ideas? His mother asked, hope evident in her voice. A few. The GI Bill will cover school. Maybe finish my degree? Or there are contractor positions. No, his mother said sharply, then softened her tone. I mean, of course it's your decision. But haven't you done enough? Haven't you given enough? Marcus looked at her, seeing the fear she'd carried for 18 months. The nights she'd startled at every unexpected phone call. The news reports she'd watched with dread. The prayers she'd sent up for his safety. Maybe, he conceded. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Well, Uncle Robert said, dabbing at the carrot stain on his shirt. Whatever you decide, you've got family here. Even if we don't always know what to say or how to act around our hero nephew. I'm not a hero, Marcus said automatically. Stop that, Angela said firmly. You are to us. Deal with it. The afternoon was waning toward evening, golden light slanting through the windows. Relatives began making departure noises. Work tomorrow, school for the kids, long drives home. But the leave-taking felt different from arrivals. Cousins hugged him, really hugged him, not the awkward half-embraces from the church. Phone numbers were exchanged with promises to actually use them. Uncle Robert shook his hand with genuine warmth, no trace of his earlier dismissiveness. You'll come for dinner Tuesday? His mother asked as the crowd thinned. Just us. Quieter. I'd like that, Marcus said, meaning it. Sarah, lingering by the door with her parents, suddenly darted back. Uncle Marcus? I'm doing a school project on modern military history. Could I interview you, if it's not too much? Marcus looked at his young cousin, remembering himself at that age, full of questions about the world beyond suburban comfort. Sure, kiddo, but I get to approve what you submit. Some stories aren't for school. She nodded solemnly, then brightened. Maybe you could come speak to my class? My teacher would flip. We've been studying Afghanistan and… Sarah, Aunt Patricia called. Don't badger your uncle. It's fine, Marcus said. We'll talk about it. As the house emptied, Marcus found himself alone with Angela and his mother in the kitchen, washing dishes in companionable silence. Thomas dozed in his carrier, exhausted from his big day. Thank you, Angela said suddenly, for coming, for saying yes to being his godfather even though you were half a world away, for showing up today even though we made it hard. You didn't… We did, she interrupted. We were so caught up in our own lives, our own comfort, we forgot to make room for you. Major Williams was right. We needed to see you. All of you. Marcus dried a plate carefully, considering his words. It's not your fault. I'm the one who came in late, stayed in the back, tried to be invisible. Why? His mother asked gently. Marcus set the plate in the cabinet, movements precise. Because I don't know how to be both anymore. The soldier and the son. The warrior and the godfather. Over there, everything made sense. Here is messier, Angela finished. But it's real, and it's yours. You don't have to choose between being a soldier and being a family member. You're both. You've always been both. When Dad died, Marcus said suddenly, surprising himself, I was in Fallujah. Couldn't come home. By the time I got back, everything was settled, cleaned up. Life had moved on. I felt like I'd failed him. Failed you. His mother's hand stilled in the soapy water. Oh, Marcus, no. I know it's not rational, but today, at the church, it felt like that again. Like I was showing up late to my own life, missing the important moments, letting everyone down. You were protecting us, his mother said firmly. Your father would have been so proud, was so proud. He kept every letter, every photo, every news clipping about your unit. He did? Angela nodded. I have the box. Was saving it to show you. He used to say, my son stands watch so we can sleep. He understood, Marcus. We all did. We forgot to tell you. The evening deepened outside, streetlights beginning to flicker on. Normal suburban life continuing its rhythm. But inside the warm kitchen, something had shifted. The careful distance Marcus had maintained was dissolving, replaced by something raw but real. The major mentioned a debrief tomorrow, Angela said, hanging up her dish towel. Will you come back after? David's making his famous chili. The one that sent Uncle Robert to the hospital? Marcus asked, a smile tugging at his lips. He's toned it down since then, Angela laughed. Mostly. Then I'll be here. As he prepared to leave, his mother pressed a container of leftover pot roast into his hands. For your apartment. Unless… Where are you staying? BOQ at Belvoir. Bachelor officer quarters. It's temporary while I figure things out. You could stay here, she offered, hope and hesitation mingling in her voice. Your room is… Well, I've kept it. changed nothing. Marcus kissed her forehead. One step at a time, Mom, but thank you. Outside, the September air carried hints of autumn. Marcus stood by his rental car for a moment, looking back at his childhood home. Through the window, he could see Angela and his mother talking, Thomas beginning to fuss for his evening feeding. Normal, peaceful, protected. His phone buzzed. A text from Rodriguez. Heard you're stateside. Beer soon? Then another, from Washington. Morrison crushed it at trials today. Thought you should know. And one more, from Major Williams. Good work today, soldier. The hardest battles aren't always overseas. Marcus typed back quick confirmations, then paused before getting in his car. Tomorrow there would be debriefs and decisions. Next week, he'd figure out what came next. But tonight, for the first time in too long, he felt the possibility of belonging in both worlds, the one he'd left and the one he'd protected. The drive back to base was quiet, but his mind was full of stories shared and connections rebuilt, full of a baby's grip on his finger and promises made at baptismal fonts, full of the strange, complicated, beautiful mess of coming home. In his pocket, his phone buzzed again. Angela had sent a photo from dinner. The whole family crowded around the table, Marcus at the center, no longer invisible but illuminated. He saved it, knowing that someday, when the transition felt impossible and the two worlds seemed irreconcilable, he'd need the reminder. Both versions of himself, soldier and son, protector and protected, could exist in the same frame. The base gates appeared ahead, familiar and foreign at once. But for the first time since landing at Andrews, Marcus didn't feel like he was returning to limbo. He was simply traveling between 2 points of belonging, learning to navigate the space between war and peace, duty and love, the family he'd chosen, and the family he'd been born into. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But tonight, he carried leftover pot roast and new memories, proof that some battles were worth fighting precisely because they led you home.